Good evening and welcome back, everyone. Please forgive me for being a little bit late. I was just eating a little miniature ice cream sundae. So, I want to have a little fun tonight. I want to start by talking about the shadow side of being too open. I want to just tell you about some of the kind of things that I hear as a spiritual teacher and as a therapist when an individual comes to me and they are far, far, far too open, far too open. But first, I have to tell the announcements. I always forget about the announcements. So, we have our next retreat coming up, January 15th through the 18th, 2026. I believe those are the dates. It's something like that in Washington State. I'll put the details together for that one, but that one's going to be a little bit of a Wild West in-person retreat. And by Wild West, I mean, um, it's going to be in like a big cabin kind of lodge, and there's going to be a lot of maybe sleeping on the floor and sharing rooms and that kind of thing. There's not going to be private rooms and we're going to have to share and cook together and all that kind of fun. So just letting you know about that one. And then the next one after that will be Shivananda Ashram in the Bahamas. And that one you could probably get some kind of first class room and a real nice setup there. March 29th, 2026. Okay. And details should be on the website for both those. Okay. Topic was for tonight. It is the shadow side of being far too open, far too open. And, this is something that is a major problem on the spiritual path. And so we are just kind of finishing up our being open and being free retreat. And so this whole retreat, we've talked about, the joy, the wonder of having an open heart, an open mind. We've spoken and experienced unity consciousness, connecting with ascended masters. Mother Mary showed up as a big heavy hitter on this retreat. Glory be to God in the highest. Thank you, Mother Mary. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We bow before you. Skanda showed up. My teacher David showed up. Many great masters showed up, and Jesus showed up. And so it's a wonderful thing to be open. It's a wonderful thing to experience angelic beings and presences. But the shadow side of being too open often arises in individuals who are not grounded, who are not grounded. And so many people come to the spiritual path almost like a young hippie comes to see the Grateful Dead, and so that's how I showed up on the spiritual path as a young hippie. And that's how I showed up to see the Grateful Dead, just this young, innocent being. And I can tell you the first time I saw the Grateful Dead, I was 14 years old. And, as I was walking into the parking lot, someone offered me right away LSD, mushrooms, kind bud, icy cold imports. And as I walked, a little bit further, across the parking lot, I saw girls without shirts on, and I was like, "Oh my God, what are those things? Like, what's going on here?" I saw people, um, you know, going at it with each other, however you say that politely on YouTube, like literally just like right there in the dirt, and is a wild thing. It's a wild thing to be a young, innocent boy, from Ohio and just all of a sudden realizing like, oh, there's a whole wild world out there, a whole wild world. And so I just want to talk. I made a long list of the kind of trouble that we can get in if we're far too open. And you have to forgive me for reading off a list, but I'm just going to do it because I think it's fun. I just came up with this list like all of a sudden. But let me fill it in a little bit more. Most spiritual beings are empaths or have empathetic nature. And when you have an empathetic nature, you're going to feel a lot. You're going to experience a lot of feeling that comes at you from the outside. And this is inherently confusing when you're feeling so much all at once. You know, most people cannot handle their own emotions, their own thoughts, their own negative or confused beliefs. But when you're an empath, you start to be able to feel. And, you know, a lot of times this awakens when we're a child. We can feel our mother, we feel our father and his confusion or his angst, his fire. We might feel our crazy psychotic brother or psychotic sister. And that's a lot. That's a lot. And as we walk on the spiritual path and you come and visit a teacher like me and you go on a retreat, and the teaching is open, open, open. Let us forever open. Let us forever open. You know, that's part of the Heart Sutra mantra. It's like gate, gate, gate. It's like open, open, open. And so this is the teaching on the spiritual path is like, let's open up. Let's open up. The problem when we open up without discernment is we can find ourselves as an easy target. We can find ourselves as being prey, like literally prey for narcissists, for cult leaders, for astral beings that don't have our highest intention in mind. And so let's see what I have on my list here. I keep pressing the wrong button here and messing this up. Let's see. So when our number one priority is to be open, oftentimes we miss, you know, what we call in the world of psychology is red flags. You know, we miss these red flags. Because when you are open and fully accepting of all of life, well, you might let someone into your home who you don't really know. And you might find out that this person, you know, when it's nighttime, they don't leave. They don't leave. And you might find that this person wants to take off their clothes, you know, and do something crazy that you might not want to do, that you might not want to do. And so it's so utterly important to have discernment. But let's have some fun here. You know, and these are things that, you know, I've heard just through my, 20 some years now being a therapist. We dismiss red flags. We find ourselves in dangerous situations. We have someone that shows up at our house who's ready to have, I'm just going to say it, astral sex with us. It's like, what is that? What is that? Is that different than just regular physical sex? Like it is. It's different. It's different somehow. And we might not want them here. We might find ourselves really confused because when we met them on the meditation retreat, they seemed so sweet and innocent. And we didn't see the red flags that were shown to us. We didn't see that they might have some ulterior motives in mind. a lot of times, I've met with so many individuals who being open is synonymous with not having any boundaries. And again, like I've spoken about this all retreat, what is it like to live without walls? What is it like to be fully open? Like you might start to merge into unity consciousness. But also, you might find yourself at a yoga retreat and the person next to you is groping you. The person next to you is breathing heavily, like right on the back of your neck. And you're wondering, like, what's going on here? Like, who is this creep right behind me? You might find yourself being taken advantage of by a spiritual teacher. I've met a number of women who came to me, after I once upon a time, I created a nonprofit with some colleagues of mine that trained spiritual teachers. Like that's the purpose of the nonprofit was to train spiritual teachers in ethics and in boundaries and how to work with individuals because I have heard so many stories of women sleeping with their spiritual teacher and whether it was their choice or not their choice, was very blurry. And let me fill in some details. I've met women who've slept with multiple spiritual teachers, healers, therapists, counselors, healers, shamans. And, I can say, I see a pattern here. I see a pattern. And it'd be very easy for me. Like my normal thing would be to point the blame, at the male authority figure, that spiritual teacher. But when I see one woman has found herself in this situation with, let's say 4 or 5, maybe 6 different healers, therapists, counselors, shamans, at some point I begin to wonder, like, is it the teacher? Yes, they shouldn't do that. Absolutely. They shouldn't be doing that. Should a counselor or therapist be sleeping with their clients? Absolutely not. Of course not. Of course not. But when this woman has a string of stories, and I begin to wonder, like, do you have issues with boundaries? Do you have issues with being far too open? And so again, I want to really clarify, this shouldn't happen. But I'll tell you it does. And I hear this story more often than I would like to. I've heard this story so often, again, that I spent, a couple of years of my life, building and creating, launching this nonprofit. And when I was at the nonprofit, I had heard so many more stories that at some point I had to say, okay, I need to walk away from this because it's making me lose faith in humanity. Let me share some more stories in this department. I used to be a part of a Tibetan Buddhist Sangha, and we would have these deep and very powerful retreats. And on the last night of the retreat, uh, the center would offer something that was called a soak. This is like a Tibetan word, and I didn't know what it was. I was invited to it, and I showed up after the retreat as a good vegan. And, people came out and they had platters of meats. And I was like, what's all this? What are all these platters of meats about? This is kind of weird. And then there would be, platters of, all kinds of cheeses. And then they'd get out bottles of wine. And there would be these like decadent cakes and cookies. And I was like, oh, like look at all these treats. Like, are they vegan? And I was like, well, what's going on here? What's going on here? And in one sense, like sometimes in tantric traditions, when you go really deep on a retreat, sometimes, at a ceremony like a soak on the last night, you kind of indulge yourself and you allow yourself to burn off some steam. And there might be some music and some dancing, and there also might be some chanting and probably not much meditation. But I've also known individuals who, on these evenings, uh, got pregnant. It's like, okay, well, what happened here? Like, what happened here? And I'm not saying that the soak ceremony is wrong. I'll just say it's one of those wild things that sometimes happens in a tantric tradition. And the idea of it was to help everyone ground their energy. Because when we open, we tend to get really high, really high. And the ceremony was about like, hey, eat some heavy meat, drink some wine, like dull your senses and get yourself like back into the heaviness and into the density of your body. Now, the thing that I did, after the retreat today, I went on a mountain bike ride. Like that's more my style. It's I'll call that safe. That's in the realm of safety, in comparison to all the things I've listed before. After I went on a mountain bike ride, I went to the hot springs and I had I'll just call it a normal soak, normal soak in the hot springs. But you'll see this, like you'll see this. I've been to so many yoga retreats. Like yoga retreats tend to be, I think, probably one of the most dangerous places to be at in the spiritual context. Because lots of people are doing yoga, and often women aren't wearing much clothing, and sometimes there's a lot of creepy men there. I'm not going to put myself in that category, but and sometimes those two clash together, and it can get real nutty. If you're at a big event center, and it's a Friday or Saturday night at the yoga festival. And so it's important, as we open up, for us to be incredibly wise and have discernment. I've heard stories of people being robbed, from being far too open, being taken advantage of being attacked, like literally in the city, because, individuals often don't have like good, clear situational awareness. Sometimes when we get really open, we start to kind of float away and we don't realize that there's a dangerous man behind us. And, next thing he's jumped us or stolen our purse or wallet or whatever it is. I can tell you that, on the spiritual path, I've had great friends who I deeply communed and connected with and did many retreats with. And then later on in life, those same friends, stole or finagled large amounts of money from this individual who doesn't have large amounts of money. And it was really painful, incredibly painful. And it would be very easy for me to blame the other and say, that's not fair, that's not right. But the thing that I lacked when that happened to me, and it's happened actually a couple of different times, but the thing that I lacked was discernment. Like sometimes I meet someone and I just fall in love with them and we become best friends. And, all of a sudden we have all these great spiritual ideas and, we're going to create a retreat center or, do something like that. And then next thing you know, the person has run off with money that I don't have, and they're never to be seen again. Let me look again at my list. I've met with individuals who are so open that they believe everything they see on the internet. And this is where we have the flat earthers, like that's an interesting one. And then on the flip side, believing every single thing that comes, off the airways of CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or whatever it is. Often when I hang out with people who aren't spiritual and I listen to about how they talk about spiritual people, often they talk about spiritual people being very gullible. And I was like, okay, yeah, there's some truth to that. When we don't have both feet on planet Earth, we're probably not thinking like an accountant. Like we don't think like an accountant. We think that anything is possible. And anything is possible, including dangerous things. And we've incarnated down from heaven into a world where there's crooks, where there's liars, where there are people who want to use us and abuse us. And this is heartbreaking, but it's a reality of planet Earth. It's a reality of planet Earth. It's like how many individuals, have I met who've been in a cult in one form or another. And when we find ourselves in a cult, it's normally because we were really open, incredibly trusting, and we left our discernment somewhere far away, and then we find ourselves, in some cult where we're being asked to drink, the Kool-Aid, or the teacher gets to have sex with, all the students, but all the female students, but the male husbands aren't allowed to have sex. They're supposed to be celibate, and it's just bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. It's so bizarre that it is both so utterly heartbreaking and also from one perspective, and I hope we can laugh a little bit, is that it's comical. It can be so comical. If anyone wants a good tragic laugh, I encourage you to watch the Mother God documentary, which is on HBO. And it's worth paying for the 1 month subscription to HBO just to watch it, because it is so good, so utterly hilarious, and so incredibly tragic. And I don't want to give it away because I want you to be just as surprised as I was, but it includes transporting someone's dead guru body, across many state lines, so transporting the dead body wrapped in Christmas lights. So, and again, I don't want to give it away, but it's an incredible documentary. And I hope, if you watch it, you can have a good laugh, a good laugh. Okay, let's see. Here's one that I've certainly done, is been really, really open. And I had this once when I was just driving home from an Ajashanti retreat. And I was driving home, it was late at night, and I just wasn't paying attention to how fast I was going. And I found myself going 80 miles an hour and, in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. And so I got myself a big fat ticket for going 30 over, which was quite expensive for me. And when the policeman pulled me over, I was so open. I saw him as God. I was absolutely full of love. And I was shocked, when he actually wrote the ticket out and handed it to me. I just thought, oh, like it's all love. It's all good, right? We're cool. I'm cool. You're cool. I'm God. You're God. No ticket, right? And it's like, no, no, it was a big, expensive ticket. Big, expensive ticket. I've certainly, in the same way, found myself just driving really, really open, and then finding myself very, very lost, very lost. And I found myself lost. This is like before cell phones, before navigation. And I've even found myself lost, with maps. I can remember I was actually going to a retreat once. Again, this was another Adyashanti retreat, and the Maps app, was supposed to take me to downtown, Boulder, or somewhere in Boulder. It's actually on the Naropa campus, and it took me out into a field, just like out in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and I wasn't, I'll just say, with it enough to realize it. Now, luckily for me, because I'm one of those individuals who likes to show up, you know, 2 or 3 hours early for a retreat, I was able to sort it out. I was able to sort it out. But, I've been with a lot of people. Uh, often it was like a spiritual girlfriend. And I'm just saying like a friend who's a girl. And we'd be driving and talking, and, all of a sudden she would, look at me, being really high, really open. And high, I mean high on life. And, she was the driver, and she'd say, "Oh, I don't know where we are." And I'm just like, why the hell are you driving? Like, you don't know where we're at. You don't know where we're at. Like, you're driving. You're in charge. You should know where we are. You should know where we are. And she didn't. And it took us a long time to course correct, to course correct. On a real, just like basic and practical note, there's this thing that happens when we're really open and we have just a high degree of empathy, is we tend to get lost in other people's feelings. And I can tell you, I've sat just in, I'll just say that the teacher's seat, and watched one empath just walk up, next to another empath, on retreat or at a conference or whatever. And, one of them has, let's say, the issue of anxiety, and the other has the issue of rage. And the two of them sit down together, and the one who has anxiety trades it with the one who has rage, and the one who has rage gives the one with anxiety their rage. And it's like they've switched wounds. It's like, wow, like, wow, that was magical. And I saw, the anxious one walk away with rage, the rageful one walk away with anxiety. And, I was just sitting there and just saying, like, wow, like, wow, wow, wow. Like, that was like a magic trick that they just did. And it's just like, and I've seen that like in a variety of ways, a variety of ways. I've seen individuals, one who's like completely sober, and then the other one being, just like I'll just say this, I'll use this politically correct term, a drunk, and these two empaths get together, and all of a sudden the sober one finds himself just drinking. And I think, probably many of us have had this experience, more so when we were, young or in high school. Like, all of a sudden I'm having a drink or a cigarette, and I don't even know why. I don't even know why. And so to counteract the chaos that can arise from being far too open, it's important that we are grounded. It's important that we are discerning. It's important that we know who we are and what our life is about, who we are and what our values are. Now, when I was young, I met a teacher, and my teacher, David, and he had impeccable values, impeccable integrity, and impeccable ethics. He also was an individual who could just channel great light and all these divine masters that would just pour down into the room. And so when I met him, I was radically open and I didn't have to think at all about discernment. I didn't have to protect myself. And ideally, I would love it if we all could live in this type of utopian world. And I was so utterly shocked when I first started teaching, and I heard story after story of abuse from, I'll say this, other teachers' students who are coming to me for support around, like, is this right? Is this normal? I was like, is this normal? This is insane. Insane. Your teacher should have great ethics. They should have incredible values, like very, very high. They should have the highest values. They should be an honorable and trustworthy individual. And I've come to realize that, some teachers have that, but many have a big mix, a big mix. And again, like in the world of yoga, if you watch like a documentary on uh, like the Bikram yoga tradition, it's a horror story. There was a tradition that I used to study, and just a little bit, just because a lot of the teachers I trained with in yoga were part of this. The Anusara tradition just was rampant with, I'll just say this, affairs is what I'll call them, affairs. But ultimately, it was abuse of power, and it was shocking to me, just shocking, the stories I heard. And again, I would love just to blame, the male teachers abusing their power and, blame it on the patriarchy or this or that. But it does take two to tango. And I don't say that to blame the women in any way, but and I've, I want to be clear here. There's also been men who've been victims of sexual assault from teachers and healers and this type of thing. I've certainly been in all kinds of just weird, wacky situations where all of a sudden a man is reaching over and, trying to grope me. Whoa, 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 what's going on here? That's, and I just get up and leave, of course. I'm not going to allow that to happen. It's just, that's not going to happen with me. And so, but sometimes, what I want to be heard is, I want us to have a vigilance within us. I don't want us to be guarded. I don't want us to be heavily armored up. But it's important for us to know, if it gets late and the teacher invites you back to their room, it's like, let's not do that. Let's not do that. And if it's late and we're inviting the teacher back to our room, let's not do that either. Like that's messy business there. It's messy business. One of the things that, I heard today online, this was I was listening to someone give a talk, and this fellow was speaking about that it's so important, if you're empathetic, to observe reality, not to absorb reality. And this is something that we've all been guilty of on the spiritual path. Is, you walk into the room with Guruji, and it's like, yeah, let's merge into this very divine spiritual energy. We just had a whole retreat of this, is where we're going to merge into the energy of the retreat. We're going to fully receive the transmission. That's a beautiful thing. If you're with a good teacher, in a healthy sangha, with good boundaries, with an individual who's psychologically mature, that's a beautiful thing. But when we're out in the general public and we are incredibly open, let us be open, let us be receptive, but let us discern whether we want to absorb this energy from the outside, or if we simply want to observe it and see it from a place of awake awareness, which is transcendent, of this world, transcendent of the chaos, the confusion, or the darkness. Because there's, there's literally a culture of creepy men that hang out at yoga classes. Like, that's a thing. I remind my daughters of this often. They remind me of it, or my oldest daughter reminds me of it often. Dad, I went to a yoga class, and there was this creepy guy there, and he wanted to stand too close to me, or he wanted to get up in my business. And so I tell her, yeah, like, let's leave that class. Let's walk away. Let's have situational awareness if it's late at night, and let's run to our car, and let's get out of there. Let's get out of there, because this is just absolutely heartbreaking to me. But dude, I have met so many women who've been, I'll just say, inappropriately touched, groped, at yoga classes. And again, it's just heartbreaking to me to hear these stories, and spend like months and months and months working through that trauma, of being going to a place, wanting to be open, and then being preyed upon. Here's a fun one. I used to meet these individuals, and I'll say this, and again, I hope this doesn't come off wrong. I met a lot of individuals who were, I'll just say, New York City Jews who used to hang out in Miami, Florida. That's a thing. There's like this train that goes from not a train, there's just a direct flight from New York City down to Miami, and they would hang out with these psychics in Miami. And they'd have questions, and so they'd go see the psychic. What should I do about this, and what should I do about that? Sometimes they were stock traders, and they would ask the psychic, like, should I put the money in this, or should I put the money on that? And the psychic would sell them, gosh, I wish I had one, sell them a candle. Now the candle would be maybe $100, maybe $150. This is some kind of racket in Miami, and with psychics. I don't know what it is, but and I don't think any of us here would fall for this one. But the psychic would say, "We'll come, and I'll do the reading for you." And it could be a tarot card reader as well. I'm a big fan of tarot, by the way, with a really skilled reader. So you go see the psychic, and they give you the reading. You put all your money on Apple or whatever it is, and in order for the reading to fully work, after you pay them $150 for the reading, you buy the $150 candle, and somehow that seals the deal. I don't know how that works, but it was a thing. And I've met individuals who spent, thousands of dollars on candles, candles from psychics. And again, like, this is just a funny one for me. And so, we have to be careful not to believe everything that comes off the lips of a spiritual teacher, a psychic, a healer, a therapist, a shaman, whatever it is. We have to have discernment. We have to have discernment. The last thing I think on my list here is just believing in the fairy tale of enlightenment. And of course, I'm a teacher of enlightenment, but the thing that I try to do is I try to share my life story. I try to share the disasters that I myself have gotten in, the disasters that have happened to me or because of me. And in the ancient traditions, there would be these myths where the great Guruji would float on a cloud. Float on a cloud. And they would know every single thing about you. And they could read minds and astral travel and predict the future, see every one of your past lives. And I'll say some of it, often a lot of it, is true. Like, my interactions with my teacher were so utterly mind-blowing. He would literally bend reality before me. It was absolutely amazing to be in his presence and to receive this transmission. Absolutely amazing. But there were a couple of times when, he was off, or just a little bit off. And like my teacher, sometimes he would get carried away with into the world stuff. And so we got like real prepped up for the Y2K. I know some of you probably weren't even born then, but no, I think everyone was probably born then. But Y2K was, this thing where we just thought it was going to be every computer on planet Earth was suddenly going to stop working. And it wasn't just the teacher that believed in this. It was all over the media. There was tremendous fear mongering. And there's even a episode of the hilarious, there's another HBO show, The Righteous Gemstones, about the televangelist preacher selling Y2K kits, and he made, hundreds of thousands of dollars, selling these survival kits, to his congregation. I certainly bought some big bags of rice and beans and had myself stocked up and prepped. And that's one that, I've struggled with over time, is Y2K, just the end of the world coming, Y2K, and then the end of the Mayan calendar, 2012. And so again, we're going to make some mistakes. We're going to get confused on the path. And I'm going to encourage us to be open, to be deeply open. But I'm also going to encourage us to have our wits about us. Now, often in the Western world, We have individuals who have too much wits. They have too much wine, too much mind. They have too much skepticism. And it becomes a real problem. The problem is the heart is just shut, and they often have like a jaded experience of life. But on the flip side of things, we can be far too open. And if we're far too open and we're preyed upon, well, we can very quickly become far too jaded. And so it's important for us to have a depth of clarity, a depth of wisdom. It's important for us to have a sense of strength and to be able to have our voice and to be able to say no or no thank you or get your effing hands off me. It's important for us to be able to speak up and speak out. It's important for us to realize that you are the most important person in your life, and that you are consciously choosing that which is best for you, for you, for you. I said this on the retreat, but there was a number of individuals, over my years of being a teacher and a therapist, a number of individuals who tried to give me their retirement funds. And it's just like, no, do not do that. If you want to offer a donation, beautiful. I happily receive that. And I truly thank you. But do not give me your life savings. Your life savings is for your life. Your life. And it's such a shame, but if we had any idea how many old ladies gave all their money away to televangelists, like it would just absolutely break our heart. It would absolutely break our heart. When you see someone be swindled, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. One more thing that I'll say, this is one that I've personally been learning about. Again, another thing that I heard on the interweb, of having a sense of what might be called suicidal empathy. So suicidal empathy is when you destroy your own life in the name of taking care of someone else. Now, please, I don't want us to confuse this with just being a parent. When you're a father or a mother, you give your life to your kids because you love them and you'll do anything for them. But we need to be careful who we give our life to, who we give our power away to, who we give our energy to. And sometimes, spiritual teachers can pull on your heartstrings and, have you donate, tens of thousands of dollars to help them build their big retreat center. But other times it's, you come into contact with a narcissist and you see that they are greatly hurting. And you have a big open heart. Then you try to save that one. When I was young, I had just a history of trying to save individuals who I don't want to say they didn't want to be saved, but they couldn't be saved. Like they needed to crash and burn and figure their life out for themselves. But some of us who step into the tradition of, well, I'll just call it like being a healer or a therapist or a nonprofit worker, we can work ourselves to death. We can give our life away. You see this in churches often as you meet these individuals who are so open, so caring, so empathetic, that they're working 80 hours a week and they have no life. And somehow, even after working 80 hours, they have no money. They have no friends. They have no real community. And they give their life away. And they're trying to save people who again can't be saved. Can't be saved. And so I have always found it important that when we study any great spiritual teaching, to also study its shadow. Because anything that exists, anything that has a form, will have a shadow. And it's important to know this. Oftentimes you hear me speak about the shadow of non-duality. But tonight, I'm speaking about the shadow of being far too open, far too empathetic. Let me offer a couple more just because they're coming to me. Some of us who have, I'll call them energy disorders, where we have so much Kundalini Shakti and we can't figure out a way to regulate it. And again, I'm someone who often teaches we don't regulate it. But there are individuals, a certain class of individuals. It's often people who never understood boundaries. And again, who are far too open. These individuals tend to have lots of Kundalini. It gets to the point where they're not functional. And they come to me and they say, Craig, can you help me stop the Kundalini? And, I see the truth very clearly. The Kundalini is not the problem. It'd be like looking at God and saying, God, you are the problem. The Kundalini is not the problem. The problem is that God is teaching an individual who has no boundaries how to have them. How to have them by giving them something so overwhelming that they finally have to learn how to get grounded, how to be in their body fully, and how to have boundaries. And so I hope that was clear. God's not the problem. And I don't want to victim blame, but it's this is a world that is really hard, really difficult, but it's our job to sort out our life. Let's do another one. People who inherit a lot of money and then just spend all that money on retreats, or they give all the money to Guruji. And so they inherit money, or they come into some money somehow, And then they blow it all in, 6 months. I had another old girlfriend, again, a friend who was a girl, who um, far too open, far too empathetic. She got in a car accident, had a lawsuit, received $1 million, and 1 year later, didn't have a dollar. Didn't have a dollar. Didn't have a dollar. And her car was impounded. Her car was impounded. And I laugh, but at the time, I wanted to shake her. I was like, girl, come on, like get your shit together. Like figure yourself out. Figure yourself out. Figure yourself out. Another one, again, we spoke about this the other night, is we get in this dance of being really open, and then, the alien entity is coming and speaking to us, and we're automatic writing, and we're up till 4 a.m. writing our bestseller novel that never gets published. And it's, you know, uh, 3,000 pages long. Whoever the fellow was who started Scientology, he was that guy. Like he's like, I can't remember what it was, but he was something like the most prolific science fiction and maybe fantasy writer. I think it was science fiction. And he would just go into automatic writing and just write and write and write. And then at some point he wrote himself a religion and somehow people bought it. And I want you to hear that mix. This fellow who is just an absolute lunatic. No offense to all the Scientology fans out there. Absolute lunatic. Just manufactured a religion out of his imagination. And then he put it out there to the world, and individuals who are far too open and not discerning found the perfect religion for themselves, where they could buy, like in Scientology, you can buy your way up the hierarchy. I don't know how that works, but he made it work, and he's been very successful. He's been incredibly successful with it. I had a good friend of mine who he handed me a book once, and I can't remember what it's called, Dianetics, something like that. And it was like the first Scientology book, and he was really into it. He was like, "Yeah, this is the thing." And he gave it to me. I read a couple pages, and I was like, "I don't think this is the thing. Like, I don't think I'm not seeing it, not buying it here." But he bought it. He bought it, and he lived his life by it, and somehow it made sense to him, and it was really shocking to me, really shocking to me. And so let's do another one. Sometimes when we're far too open and we have no boundaries, and we believe every single thing we think, and we're a law of attraction person, and all of a sudden we find ourselves homeless. We've quit our job, and we find ourselves living in the jungles of Hawaii. I've met a number of people who have followed that route. How about being far too open and just believing every thought you had and spinning out into psychosis? I've seen that countless times. Countless times. And so I think I'm going to stop there with that. And I'm going to invite us just to take a moment and to smile just at the craziness of being an angel here in a world of darkness, world of confusion, and a world of beauty. I'm going to invite us just to smile at the human condition. The human condition of being this bright light, this radiant spirit, and then incarnating into a world where your best friend might steal from you, or your lover you might discover they are a narcissist. You might discover that they are crazy, like literally crazy, like literally crazy. Yeah. And so I invite you to reflect, what is like, what's some of the trouble that you've gotten in on the path? Because we're not going to walk this path without getting into a little chaos and confusion. Now, let me turn this into a tantric teaching very quickly. One of the beautiful things that arises if you find yourself as a victim, I'm just going to call it, of life, is you learn to get grounded real quick. Real quick. You start to go on the fast path where you learn about discernment, you learn about strength, you learn about your power, you learn about your voice, you learn that you need at least 1 foot on planet Earth. 1 foot. Now I'm looking down here at my white Tara picture, and I wish I had a different picture right now, but many of you have seen, pictures of Tara's where, she's seated cross-legged, but only one leg is in lotus and the other one is bent downward, and she has 1 foot on planet Earth. Mine, she's sitting in full lotus here, but if you go look around, if you're ever at a Buddhist temple, you'll see that there's all these images of Tara with 1 foot and half lotus and the other touching the earth. And that's the reminder from Tibetan Buddhism. It's like, hey, you can say this world is an illusion, and it absolutely is. But you also better know that this world is absolutely real. And so the further we walk on the spiritual path, we see that truth is a paradox. It's a paradox. And it absolutely includes the pairs of opposites. Absolutely includes the pairs of opposites. And so if you've found yourself in one of the things that I humorously listed tonight, let me say this first. Please forgive me for making it a humorous topic, but I hope we can have some distance and just laugh at it. And just to see this as the human condition. Because our other choice is to cry, which is also a fully valid response. I have certainly shed hundreds of tears when I've heard these stories. Hundreds of tears. I've shed hundreds of tears when I myself found myself, getting robbed or stolen from or taken advantage of in one form or another. One more that's coming to me just for fun is oftentimes we'll meet a teacher and they'll sell us the 1, 2, 3 steps to enlightenment, 1, 2, 3 steps to perfect health, 1, 2, 3 steps to perfect healing. And again, like most everyone here has paid some good money for one of those courses. And come on now, sometimes those courses are really good and are really powerful and are very healing. But oftentimes the sales pitch is much greater than the actual practical integrated reality that comes from following that very program perfectly. And so sometimes there's just really well-intentioned, super excited spiritual teachers who happen to be marketing experts. You know, I'll say this, a marketing failure, but some teachers are marketing experts and they're really good at selling you their course. And sometimes it's a good course, but it doesn't always create the perfect results that it said on the one-liner sales pitch. And so anyways, let us shut down our eyes and let us fully validate that it is so hard to be human, that it's so difficult, so painful, so messy, so complicated. And let us take a deep breath and forgive ourselves. Forgive ourselves for the many mistakes that we have made in the realm of discernment, in the realm of observation, in the realm of seeing the red flags, but then dismissing them. Let us forgive ourselves. But then let us take a deep breath and let us acknowledge that we could all probably be a lot more discerning, a lot more grounded, and that this world is here to wake us up. Sometimes through throwing a bucket of cold water on our head, on our head. And so with that, let us take some deep, full breaths. And let us welcome a descent of divine grace. Inviting this holy radiance to pour down into our body. And we ask the divine to give us the strength to see this world with immense compassion. Immense compassion. Forgiving those who have trespassed against us. Forgiving them, not because what they did was right, we're okay with it. But forgiving them because we no longer want to carry the pain of the past within us. And so as we breathe in and breathe out, let us be spiritual warriors here on planet Earth, where we are radically open and radically discerning. And so as you continue to breathe, I invite you to notice your entire spine lighting up with a holy fire. A holy fire. A fire that both protects and enlivens your strength. A fire that burns up any darkness or pain or old karma and confusion within your field. And this may sound harsh, but I'm going to say it. I invite you to look at the various ways you have been ignorant on the spiritual path. And I invite you to bring those beliefs, those ideas into the light. I invite you to literally cast those ignorant beliefs out, throwing it on this fire of discernment. Be fully burnt up and turned to ash. Fully burnt up and dissolved. Smiling with humility. Laughing at the experience of being human. Acknowledging that despite any and all pain, any and all ways that you have been swindled, let us together smile and acknowledge your strength. Acknowledge that nothing here has killed us. Nothing here has harmed our essential innocence, our purity, our brilliance. Yes, our ego may have been hurt. Yes, our ego may have been traumatized. Yes, our body may have been harmed or even abused. But let us stand in the fire of truth, acknowledging that you are a spiritual warrior, that you are a goddess, that you are a being of light, and that nothing here on planet Earth can destroy you. No human can hurt the depth of your soul. No human can veil the radiance and the purity of your light. Now, our egos will certainly disagree. Our egos will cry and complain and say this world is not fair. And from the perspective of the ego, I will absolutely agree. But from the perspective of the soul, let us make no mistake. You are a bright, fiery, indestructible presence. And there's nothing in this lifetime or any lifetime that can put out, that can extinguish your brilliance. And so as we breathe, as we feel, I invite you to claim this truth. to know this truth in the depth of your soul and in the depth of your human manifest personality. You are here to overcome darkness. You are here to stand as a being of light in a world of confusion. And so, a deep bow of respect to each of you. So much love. And please, if any way you found me offensive tonight or unskillful or not being trauma sensitive, please forgive me. But know that I have your highest intention, your highest. I want to support you in the highest way, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So I wanted to cut everyone loose, but Greg, he raised his hand. Let's hear from Greg real quick, and then we'll call it a night.
Hey, what's up, Craig? Hey, hey, everybody. Good to be here, fam.
Hey, Greg.
Craig,
Hey.
that was great. Thank you. And my question is, I know animals, dogs and cats are like so empathic. And I have a dog. I live with a good buddy and it's his dog. So I'm like an uncle to the dog. And I
Yeah.
love him so much. And he's such a little empath.
Yeah.
And he's doing great. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes I look at him and I can tell he's just wrapped up in so much energy. Do you
Yeah.
know any suggestions how I could support him other than just playing and loving him and stuff? Any suggestions how I can support this beautiful little empath dog when he's really like maybe overwhelmed?
Yeah. Okay. This is a great question. This is a great question just for tonight. And I'll say, I don't care if we're talking about a dog or a human. The teaching is going to be the same. The teaching is going to be the same. So, two things, and one of them you already named it. Through the act of physical play, we awaken the dog's strength. This is true with other humans. It's one of the reasons why I train in martial arts, is because in the act of play fighting, of roughhousing, you awaken the individual's strength. And you'll see this, like, so I hang out at a jiu-jitsu dojo, and there they teach women self-defense. And you'll see the women who come to women's self-defense are often, I want to say this, almost always victims of abuse, or victims of abuse who are bringing their children, because they don't want their children to also be victims of abuse. And what do the ladies do there? They fight, they play fight, they play wrestle, they play engage in a physical way. And it gets these women in touch with their strength and their power. It wakes up their hara, wakes up their fire, it wakes up their voice. So you're already doing it through playing with the dog. You're playing with the dog. Like, that's the greatest thing, is playing with it in a rough way where the dog gets to fight and wrestle with you and roughhouse. Like, it's so necessary. It's so good. Now, the second thing is, on the opposite end of the spectrum, this is more of the trauma therapy approach. How do we do trauma therapy with the dog? We rub the dog's spine, just gently rubbing the spine, like we're petting the dog. We're teaching it, hey, you're at home and you are safe and it's okay to relax. So we teach the dog to relax. Now, the thing that we don't want to do is, if, let's say, we have a highly traumatized dog and the dog's like really anxious, and if we are a super anxious person and that dog is super empathetic, that's not going to be a good match. And so it's just like we know this in the world of counseling. It's like, if you have one super anxious person don't put them, like, don't couple them with another super anxious person. Like, two anxious, empathetic people is a disaster. It's like the two of them make themselves sick, when they have just all this energy of anxiety. And so the big thing, with helping the dog to relax is, like, especially with a dog, if you can get the dog a dog house, like a little nest, a crate. When I was young, I thought a crate was like a form of abuse for dogs. It's like, why are you putting the dog in the crate? We want to get the dog a crate or a dog house, but with an open door where the dog can go into it and soothe itself and have like some protective walls around it where it can just sit in there and relax. And again, the same is true with a human. If someone's really anxious, what do they need? They need a good, solid home, a home that doesn't have all this energy coming from the outside. And so dogs often will mirror us. If we're super calm, that helps the dog to learn to be calm. But again, like, some dogs just get really stuck, in this empathetic anxiety. Now, I can say this, that I've had a lot of friends, here in the state of Colorado who have played with giving their dog CBD, just to help chill its nerves out. And it's just like it's a whole industry. You go to any dog food store, any pet store in Colorado, they're selling CBD for pets, but I'm not against CBD. I think that's fine, but uh, through you being a strong, noble presence, Greg, that's the number one thing. And it sounds like you're already doing that. Now, the thing about dogs is, because dogs don't have such a rational mind, they're going to take a longer time to heal than most humans. So if a dog gets stuck in a habit of anxiety, that's a tough thing to break. That's a tough thing to break. And so, I've seen people, work with their dogs in all kinds of ways. And, sometimes it gets a little neurotic where the dog's with them in every moment and they're just coddling the dog always. I mean, that's probably not the right thing to do, because it's good for that dog to have its little nest, to have its little cave. It's good for us to roughhouse a little bit with the dog and teach it about its strength and help it to work out its anxiety and for it to feel its power. And it's good for us just to, sit on the couch, with our dog and rub its spine and talking to him, talking to this dog and just letting him know, hey, buddy, it's okay. And we can certainly use, my favorite mantra, which is, I love you and it's okay. I love you and it's okay. I love you and it's okay. I had this horrible thing happen. It was just the other night with my dogs. I was driving across country, as coming back home to Colorado. It was late at night, and you know, like, I just want to get out, and I'll just say this: everyone in the car had to go potty. So the two dogs and their dad. So it's like we all jumped out of the car, and we're out in the middle of the desert, and I looked at my dogs, and both of them were limping. And I was like, guys, what's going on here? And so I picked them up, and they had gotten into some cactus bushes. I realized I stopped basically in a field of cactus. So just a horrible thing. I felt so bad that I did this to my little buddies. And they had like 20, just these little cactuses, like there were these little balls with just like 25 spikes on them. And they're stuck on their face, stuck on, they would have them like 10 of them on just on one paw and up the side of their leg and around their hindquarters and everything. And it was just heartbreaking for me. And here they were, they didn't know what happened to them. They didn't know why they were, their whole body was just lit up with pain. And, I worked with them, through being really calm and just gently pulling the cactus off, just each one by one. And, they were like biting me because they weren't sure, like, what the hell's going on here? Like, why am I in so much pain? And, why is, you know, I think they knew I was trying to help them, but it also just hurt while I was helping them. And, especially my puppy, like I just held him all night and I was just rubbing his spine, just letting him know, hey, bud, I love you and it's okay. Like, we're going to get through this, and being just super, super tender with him. And of course, uh, it was like, I had to bring him home and get out the shavers, and like, some of them were stuck in the fur and I just had to shave them off. But, they came around. They came around, but they were just like shivering in fear because they didn't know what had happened to them. But really, just I was holding them, saying, I love you and it's okay. I love you and it's okay. And so we'll end on that. Beautiful question, Greg. Thank you so much for that. And so thank you all for being here. You are all bright lights. And to the parts of you that have been traumatized, that have been hurt, we work with this mantra of I love you and it's okay. It's okay. Good night, everyone. So good to be with you. So much love.